And now it is time for us to talk about the great Croatian voice of Zinka Milanov. And I thought that it was a good idea to start with a recording of hers from La Gioconda by Maestro Amilcare Ponchielli. Of course, we are referring to this final, her almost the final part. She sings the aria from the aria called Suicidio, where she's about to commit suicide. But before we get there, I think it is a good idea to start saying that Zinka Milanov, well, she was born in Croatia, year 1906, very early, the beginning basically of the past century. Her last name was not really Milanov, but it was changed to Milanov because people thought that her last name was not very artistic and glamorous enough for the country. We are referring that, or it is a good time for me to share with you that most of her career turned out to be in the US, in America, and more specific at the Metropolitan Opera House. She was a star at the Metropolitan Opera House for a good number of years. I'm going to be giving a little more details on the biography because I think it is very interesting in regards to Zinka Milanov. Um, and I think that the next point, after having shared that she was born in 1906, which makes her a contemporary, be sharing the stages with most of the greatest singers of the past century after the 40s. So basses, baritones, mezzos, and tenors. At most likely, if they were great singers, at some point they had, or it turned out to be an opportunity for them to sing with Zinka Milanov. The other thing that I wanted to share with you, because I think it is important and you're going to see it here and there, is that many people refer to Zinka as a dramatic soprano. And many still keep thinking that she's a dramatic soprano. I wanted to clarify that from my perspective, her voice appears more on the spinto side, but I think that the confusion resides on the fact of something that we have shared before. She comes from this region in the world where voices tend to have this brightness for the high notes and a very solid center, and as well very solid and high volume as well, more solid than Italian or other European voices. These voices that tend more to be on the Slavic side have these qualities, and Zinka Milanov's voice clearly is one of those voices with strong middle notes, strong right notes, easiness for a number of high notes, and a huge volume, which is something that also characterizes these voices from that region of the world. And that's where I think that the confusion resides. When people think of a spinto soprano, maybe they would like to hear something closer to what to the sound of the Italian voices. And Zinka Milanov was a voice that corresponded to the nature of the region of the world where she was born, and that's why people liked or thought she was a dramatic soprano, closer maybe to Turandot, which was not the case, maybe closer to Macbeth, which was not the case. But we are going to talk a little about the roles she sang often. So once we have clarified that she met most of the superstars of the past century, and that her voice is clearer leaning towards a spinto soprano, but the confusion comes from the color of the voices that are from that region, that people tend to think that she's actually a dramatic soprano. And well, even if she was, we have also shared that people in the world of opera like to engage in discussions like this forever just to prove one point or another. We are not going to spend more time clarifying on her tessitura, because everything will be clearer as we go through her roles. We understand that at the years of when she was just 21 years, 1927, her debut was in Il Trovatore. In a way, the career of Zinka was similar to Maria Callas, of course, in a way that, as you may know, Maria started her career in Greece. But to be sincere, Greece has never been an important place, does not have an important opera house to the eyes of the world. That would be the same for Croatia. She started singing there, and in fact, she sang there from the 1927 till the 1936 for almost 10 years, 9 years already, for the as a main opera soprano singer in the Croatian National Theatre. But provided that Croatia has never been one of the most important theaters, many people think that her career actually starts at the end of the 30s, in the 1937, when she makes her debut at the Met, at the Metropolitan Opera House. So, if not many people even know that there is an opera house in Croatia, but everybody knows that the largest and one of the most important opera houses of the past 100 years is, of course, the Metropolitan Opera House. So she happens to make her debut there. Of course, she has enough connections, and she has been heard by important people such as Toscanini, just to say that, hey, this lady wants the opportunity of working for the Met. And once she starts at the Met, comes back and forth for a couple of times, but she retired from the Met almost 30 years ago. So people say that Zinka Milanov's career is 30 years, just taking into account the years at the Met. But if you add her years at the Croatia Opera House, it is almost a career of almost 40 years, which is extraordinary. Moreover, given the tessitura and the complexity of the rules that she's used to sing. I was telling you that she had the opportunity, or the world had the opportunity of watching Zinka Milanov singing uh, operas with the most important singers of the past century, of course, among which we can name Giuseppe Di Stefano, and why not the Sweden tenor Jussi Bjärling. In fact, there are a couple of very, very interesting recordings of Jussi and Sinka whose voices tend to share the same point in common. They come from an area of the world where voices are very solid, seem to have lots of stamina in the center, in the high notes, and that's why many people also think that Jussi Bjärling is a spinto, or many people even think Jussi Bjärling is a dramatic tenor, while he's not. It's just the characteristic of the voices of that area of the world. But well, Jussi Bjärling and Sinka had couple of very interesting recordings that you can find pretty much everywhere. And now, jumping very quick into the roles she sang, let's talk about her debut, Il Trovatore. There are many recordings of her Leonoras. In fact, she sang the two Leonoras from uh, Maestro Giuseppe Verdi. She was, from my perspective, a very achieved Verdian singer. The heavy roles of the Verdian singer, because we have Gilda, which is lighter, as we have discussed in a previous entry, but Il Trovatore matches her vocal capacities very well. Her Leonora in La Forza del Destino, many people say that one of the best versions of the Pace Pace Mio Dio is in the voice of Zinka Milanov. She sang the very complex role of the soprano in Un ballo in maschera. There are also several recordings over there. There is, of course, the also very complex role of Aida, also from Maestro Giuseppe Verdi. Recordings you can find there. There is a couple of recordings, very interesting, of hers singing Desdemona in Otello, which is also very interesting. Her Ave Maria, her Salce Salce is a very interesting recording to hear, because we can witness all the maturity and the perfect use of her voice. And I think I haven't mentioned, but one of the things that calls my attention is that Sinka even at her beginning, even if she herself claims and her vocal professor thinks the same, that she needs to work on her technique, even though she is young, one can witness that the technique she developed throughout all her career is very solid. And it really calls my attention because it takes an extraordinary artist who is at disadvantage because we have already mentioned that Croatia is not one of the top opera houses, that not being able at the beginning of her career of having face to face with the major world opera stars and the major maestros, she still manages to have a very solid technique, which leads her to a career of almost 40 years, as we mentioned earlier. So, continuing with her roles, she also sang the soprano role for Simon Boccanegra, and there are two other roles for which she's very much remembered. La Gioconda, the role that we just opened with, which is an almost impossible role to sing. Very heavy, very demanding, many high notes, uh, challenging duets, uh, emotionally strong, Gioconda, and super long. So all of that, Zinka Milanov sang a very good Gioconda in the opera of Maestro Amilcare Ponchielli. There are a couple of recordings of hers live, where you can witness the qualities of her voice. I am also recalling now that I just heard a recording of hers of Traviata in the first act. To be sincere, Traviata in the first act is not really for her voice. We have already mentioned her capacity, the stamina of her voice, which works better for the heavy Verdi. So, Aida, Un ballo in maschera, La forza del destino, Il trovatore are just perfect, as well as Gioconda. And we are going to wrap up today's comments with maybe her most important role throughout her career. And I am referring to her Tosca. She portrayed Floria Tosca for a good number of times, and we have also discussed about the the very complex role that it is vocally and emotionally speaking for a soprano singing Floria Tosca by Maestro Giacomo Puccini. Many people recall Zinka Milanov because of her Verdian roles, her heavy Verdian roles, and her Tosca, which of course if you can listen to one of her recordings of her Tosca, it's very solid role. She clearly understands the emotions and what she has to do with the voice in her Tosca. So, of course, it is worth listening to her Toscas, any Tosca that you choose. And of course, we end up approaching the end of her career. And I found that there is a recording of hers singing this very beautiful aria that I have shared with you in the past that I love a lot, and we are referring to this what is called in English the song to the moon from the opera Rusalka, the aria Miesiszku na niedin lubokam, uh, which I am very surprised to. Well, I have to say that she sings this one at the end of her career, and I noticed the comments of people criticizing that her voice is not at her peak. But I mean, we have discussed it in the past. No voice lasts forever. So at some point, she needed to retire because she knew that she was not at her top any longer, and she decided to retire and continue as a vocal teacher, which of course she was the teacher of several very important singers of the second half of the past century, and we are going to keep her in our minds for all the extraordinary nights and recordings that the Queen of the Pianissimi, she was also called because of her capacity. Even though she had a huge, powerful voice, she was also able to master her pianissimi, and so, to the Queen of the Pianissimi, we would like to remember her with all the love and appreciation for what she did. And from this version of her in her later years, In the Song to the Moon, we can listen to the expertise that she developed throughout all those years. Maybe she's not at her peak, but of course, there is the quality of an artist that she always was. And I also wanted to comment that this is maybe the first or the second time that I listened to all the sounds, to all the vowels and consonants that this aria is written in the original language. We can understand to each and every one of the syllables and words that Zinka is singing. So, with no more saying about it, let's say goodbye to Zinka Milanov, who left us in year 1989 by listening to a small part of her version of the song To the Moon from Rusalka.
Yes.